If you've had any interaction with the Word of Faith movement, the prosperity gospel, or been a part of it or are a part of it, you will hear all these amazing stories of financial miracles, of people having these, just incredible testimonies of what God has done for them and given them stuff. And of course, we see that these ministries, some of them are very, very wealthy. Not just in the Western world, even in the global South, you'll find that people are really, some of the Word of Faith ministers are really wealthy. They have these amazing mansions and flying private jets and building these kind of, empires in a sense, right? So the question that always comes then is, where does the money come from? Where does the money come from? And I have wrestled with this because being part of the Word of Faith movement myself as a younger person, I saw a lot of wealth, not in my life particularly, but I saw it in the ministries I was part of. And I experienced a few, more limited financial miracles myself. So I had to question, where does it come from and how does this work, right? So there are three different ways of approaching this, I think. And I'll give you one answer, or not answer, but I'll give you one approach that I think might surprise some, but has started to become a very helpful explanation to me, the way I want to approach this. But okay, so let me give you a few ideas. The first thing is, of course, it can just be natural reasons. So if you just, skip all supernatural stuff, they are just natural reasons to their wealth. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. You can see, for example, that the teaching on sowing and reaping, that has generated great incomes for ministers. It really does. There are even, scholarly studies to show and to prove that teaching itself really generates amazing income for ministries and ministers. So I think just that teaching alone, that if you sow, you will reap, that has motivated people to donate so much more money than maybe they afford or than usual. And I think Word of Faith ministries, you really gain from that. So yeah, and that has caused people to say that this is just a natural kind of pyramid scheme, right? So if you have this critical base of people just giving a lot, the person on top will get wealthy. So that's just one way of looking at it. So where does the money come from? Well, just from the people that are just, taken advantage of or whatever, right? So there are other natural reasons you could look at. You could look at tax laws, for example, that it seems like the Word of Faith message really works in places where the tax laws are conducive for churches and to create wealth. So some people are saying that this is one reason why the Word of Faith prosperity gospel really works in the US and really doesn't perform well in Canada, because Canada has a totally different set of tax laws, for example. The same goes for many European nations, that the tax laws are so different that it's hard to create these empires and this wealth that maybe is needed to kind of confirm the worldview in a sense, right? All these are natural reasons where the money comes from or how it kind of works, right? Other people pointing out that Word of Faith ministries are very business minded. Many of them are very talented. And in fact, many Word of Faith, names, they also just don't call themselves pastors or ministers. They also call themselves business people, businessmen, right? So businesswomen. So they're also involved on the side of doing different kinds of businesses. And in that sense, just generate a lot of money and a lot of wealth. Some big, ministries, Word of Faith ministries, they just don't sell books or sell merch that generates money for them. Of course it does, but they also are involved in real estate. They're involved in bank business. They're involved in, of course, in education and things like that. So there are all these kinds of businesses going on around the Word of Faith ministries that can also be these natural reasons where the money comes from. But to me, all those natural reasons might, explain some. They still don't explain everything, because I believe, and what I have seen, is that there is a supernatural element to the wealth. And where does it come from is still my question. So looking at the supernatural reasons, what supernatural reasons could there be, right? The devil is the first one that many times come to mind. Like, this is a magical scheme. this is a voodoo. This is a cargo cult. This is just, they're using magical means to just attract money or whatever. Or even, more explicitly, it's the devil who has given and given all this money to deceive them and deceive all these Christians. Well, and we have to take this argument seriously. I cannot just throw that out and say that that's just superstition, because I believe the devil really can. I mean, the devil tempted Jesus with the wealth of this world, right? In Matthew 4 and Luke 4, we have that narrative. So I think we have to take it seriously that some of the wealth could come from darker powers, right? And that that is a possibility. But from my experience and from what I've seen and studied, that doesn't fit very well. I just can't swallow the idea that all this wealth is from the devil, nor just natural reasons. And this has led me to consider this third option. So instead of just being stuck with these two possibilities, is it human or is it the devil? This dichotomy, I want to suggest a third option. Is it possible that God has given them this wealth? And you might go like, what are you saying? Well, let me explain, all right? There is something we can call the humility of God that is revealed when you study the Bible. And that sometimes God will oblige our demands even though it's not in his plan. For example, you have the children of Israel, right? Demanding a king in 1 Samuel 8:20. That they really wanted to be like the other nations. So they just demanded to get a king, and God gave them a king, right? But even more so, what struck me was the parable of the prodigal son, or the lost son, right? In Luke chapter 15, we have this story of this young man who comes to his father, and in French he says, right, I wish you were dead. I want the inheritance now. Now, give it to me here. The inheritance was still in his future, but he wanted it in the present, right? He was not okay that it was still not there yet. He wanted it here, now. So he demanded it. And the father obliged. And that is some part of that story that really we need to just kind of digest that God really, obliged the son and gave him the inheritance. Yeah. So when I studied that, it just hit me. Is it that it's God who actually has given these riches to the Word of Faith ministers? And when that thought hit me, I'm like, whoa, they are actually burning their eternal inheritance. They are just burning that right now, And you go and you look at God who obliges these demands. And then you look at like chapter 16 of Luke, where you have the parable of the story of the rich man and Lazarus, right? And how when the rich man dies and he complains about his suffering, and Abraham tells him, you have already received your comfort. Well, so there's something there with burning your inheritance, burning your comfort, right? That is very very serious. I'm not saying that I believe that every Word of Faith minister will go to hell. I'm not saying that. Neither am I saying that we should take this very, in an easygoing fashion, like, wow, can you claim your inheritance now? Well, let me do it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying we have to take this very, very seriously. But the idea that maybe the wealth is actually coming from God will give us a third option of understanding and maybe approaching what's going on. And I don't know if you found that helpful at all, but to me, it gave me another option of thinking about these things, another dimension, another tool for thought, if you may, right? But we should be so careful about these things. Because if we do this, we are trading, brass for gold. We're trading what's not valuable for what's of eternal value. We remember Jesus said, they have received their reward. That's a statement Jesus uses and we had to be so careful that we don't end up demanding things now that we should have as an eternal inheritance, and we demand it so much. We hold God's nose to the eternal promises that we demand things in the now that were not meant to be now. And we miss the cosmic marshmallow test, if you will, and then end up in a mess that way. So I think these things are serious, and I think we need to take them seriously. But this is a possibility, at least. What I'm just saying is it that we are trading something of so much more worth and of eternal value, that we can demand something so much now that God obliges us? Because in the story of the prodigal son, it never says that he ever got the inheritance back. So I don't know if you find this perspective helpful at all. For me, it became one way of thinking. I haven't fully arrived, but what do you think? You can put your comments here or reach me on social media. And till I see you in the next video, God bless you.